The United States Supreme Court is once again stepping into the contentious arena of gun rights, a topic that has long divided Americans and shaped the nation's legal landscape. This time, the justices are set to examine a question at the intersection of two hot-button issues: whether people who use illegal drugs can be barred from owning firearms, and what that means for the broader interpretation of the law. The outcome could redefine the boundaries of the Second Amendment, potentially altering the rights of millions of Americans, and force us to reconsider who is deemed responsible enough to bear arms in a society where both gun ownership and drug use are deeply polarizing topics. The law in question, which has long prohibited habitual drug users from owning guns, is now under scrutiny as the court weighs whether such restrictions are truly constitutional or simply outdated relics of a different era. The case, United States versus Hemasti das Himani, pits public safety concerns against individual liberties, raising difficult questions about how far the government can go to prevent potential harm while still respecting personal freedoms. The recent conviction and subsequent pardon of Hunter Biden under this very statute has brought the issue into the national spotlight, sparking heated debates about fairness, political influence, and the consistency of the law's application. Now, the Supreme Court must decide if this law can withstand the rigorous historical test it has established for all gun control measures, a test that demands any restriction be deeply rooted in the nation's traditions and history. The central question: does drug use automatically disqualify someone from Second Amendment protections, or should the law be more nuanced, taking into account the realities of modern life and the complexities of addiction? The answer will require a deep dive into American history, legal precedent, and a careful weighing of public safety versus individual rights, as the justices consider the broader implications for civil liberties and government power. This case is about more than just guns and drugs. It's about how we interpret our most fundamental rights in a rapidly changing society, and how the highest court in the land will shape the balance between freedom and security for generations to come. The case began with Ali Daniel Hemeni, a Texas resident who was charged after police found a pistol in his vehicle during a routine traffic stop. The discovery of the firearm led to further investigation. Authorities alleged that Hemeni was a regular marijuana user, which complicated his legal standing. Under federal law, individuals who are unlawfully using controlled substances are prohibited from owning firearms. This law aims to prevent potential dangers associated with impaired judgment. Hemeni decided to challenge this law, arguing that it infringed upon his Second Amendment rights to bear arms. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals reviewed the case and ultimately agreed with Hemeni, ruling that the law was unconstitutional as applied to him. The court argued that merely being a habitual user of marijuana isn't sufficient grounds to strip someone of their gun rights. There must be clear evidence of actual impairment or direct threat to public safety. This decision created a significant legal conflict with other courts, setting the stage for a potential review by the Supreme Court. Hemeni's legal team highlighted the inconsistency in federal law, pointing out that alcohol users, despite the risks associated with alcohol consumption, are not banned from owning guns. The ruling effectively nullified a key federal gun control law in several states, prompting the federal government to file an appeal. The Biden administration has argued that the lower court's decision could undermine public safety and set a dangerous precedent. Now, the Supreme Court faces a high-stakes constitutional question with far-reaching national implications as it prepares to weigh in on this contentious issue. The government's defense relies on originalism, interpreting the Constitution as the founders intended. Instead of citing modern crime data, they point to historical laws that disarm those deemed dangerous, like habitual drunkards or the mentally unwell. They argue that today's habitual drug users are the modern equivalent, justifying restrictions for public safety. This approach follows the Supreme Court's 2022 Bruin decision, which requires modern gun laws to have historical analogs. Hemeni's lawyers counter that historical laws targeted public intoxication, not private use, and that marijuana is now legal in many states. They argue the government is stretching history to justify a broad ban. The debate centers on whether the government's analogy to historical dangerous persons is valid. The justices must decide if this tradition supports the current law. The 2020,000 ton, de konidait are need deno. The 2022 Bruin decision changed how courts evaluate gun laws, demanding a strict focus on history and tradition. Before Bruin, courts balanced public safety against gun rights. Now, only historical precedent matters. For a law to stand, there must be a comparable regulation from the era when the Second Amendment was adopted. This has sent lawyers searching for historical analogs to modern gun laws. The Hemeny case is one of the first major tests of this new standard, focusing on who can own a gun, rather than how or where guns are carried. The outcome will clarify how strictly the court will apply its history-focused test. Gun rights advocates see Bruin as a tool to challenge many regulations. For gun control supporters, it's a major hurdle, as few modern problems have direct historical counterparts. The court's ruling will set a crucial precedent for future Second Amendment cases. The Hemeny case comes at a pivotal moment, following a series of Supreme Court decisions that are actively shaping the boundaries of the Second Amendment in modern America. These rulings have begun to clarify and, in some ways, redefine the limits of the Bruin test, which requires courts to look for historical analogs when evaluating gun laws. In United States v. Rahimi, for example, the court upheld a law that bars gun ownership for individuals under domestic violence restraining orders, even though there wasn't a perfect historical law from the founding era that matched this restriction. The majority opinion accepted a broader analogy, reasoning that disarming those found to be dangerous is consistent with the nation's long-standing traditions. This approach suggests the court may not require a specific colonial-era law about drug users to uphold modern restrictions, but instead may look for a general tradition of disarming those considered irresponsible or dangerous to themselves or others. The government can argue that the principle behind disarming drunkards and the mentally ill in early America applies to habitual drug users today, drawing on the same logic. In another recent case, the Supreme Court upheld federal restrictions on so-called ghost guns, untraceable firearms assembled from kits, showing the court's willingness to allow some level of federal oversight and regulation, even as it affirms core gun rights. These decisions reveal a court that is protective of individual gun rights, but also pragmatic about the need to balance those rights with public safety concerns and evolving threats. The Hemeny case will be a crucial test of just how far the court is willing to stretch historical analogies to address new challenges. Its outcome will further define the boundaries of the Second Amendment, shaping the future of gun rights and regulations in the United States. The Supreme Court's decision will ripple through federal and state gun laws. Striking down the ban would invalidate a key federal statute and impact hundreds of prosecutions. Over 30 states have similar laws. A ruling against the federal ban would trigger challenges to these state statutes. State legislatures might have to rewrite gun laws, potentially loosening regulations nationwide. Upholding the ban would affirm the government's power to disarm those deemed a public safety risk, as long as there's a historical analog. The decision will guide how lower courts apply the Bruin test to status-based restrictions. Regardless of the outcome, the ruling will shape public policy and future legal battles over who can own a gun. The debate over the limits of the Second Amendment is far from over. The Supreme Court's job is to ensure federal law is applied uniformly across the country. The Fifth Circuit's decision to strike down the gun ban for drug users created a split with other courts. This means a person's gun rights can change simply by crossing state lines. A situation the Supreme Court must resolve. The justices will set a single, national standard for gun ownership and drug use. The case also highlights the clash between federal marijuana prohibition and state legalization. The court's ruling will provide clarity for law enforcement, judges, and citizens. It will resolve the circuit split and set a binding precedent for all lower courts. While the decision won't please everyone, it will create much-needed legal certainty. This is one of the Supreme Court's most essential roles in the American system. The Supreme Court's decision will shape gun policy and public debate for years. Striking down the ban would expand Second Amendment rights and challenge other status-based restrictions. It would align the law with changing attitudes toward marijuana, but raise public safety concerns. Upholding the ban would affirm that the Second Amendment is not absolute and support regulations for risky individuals. The decision will set the terms for future debates about guns, rights, and public safety. The Hemeny case is a barometer for how strictly the court will apply its historical test. The outcome will influence everything from federal enforcement to state legislation. The conversation about guns in America will continue, but the rules of engagement will be forever changed.